Recording, Chair.
Good afternoon. Can I welcome everybody to this afternoon's local access forum? We'll do apologies in just a minute, but one of our apologies is Helen at very short notice, and therefore I'm stepping in at very, very short notice, and you'll have to forgive me because I haven't quite got the technology to do it, so I can only see so much on my screen and I can't see papers at the same time as documents, but hopefully between us we will manage. So, and welcome to anybody who's listening in. Thank you for being interested. So I think we start with the apologies, and Kath, I think you've got those, haven't you?
Yes, we have apologies from Nick Hines, Nigel Starsfield, Paul Abel, Rob Kirkwood, Helen Hemstock, Edmund Hopkins and Linda Woodings.
Thank you very much, and just welcome Councillor Pavlos. I'm just explaining. I'm trying to chair at very short notice because Helen's had to drop out at short notice, and I don't have the full technology. So between us, we're going to try and manage. I think the next item is the minutes of the last meeting. Kath, are you able to share the screen of those? Because I don't print things out, so I scribble my own notes, but I can't page through like Helen does. And I just wonder whether that might help people. If not, we'll just have to. I did scribble the headings of what we discussed, but we usually run through the minutes. But
right,
I know when we do it in person, we usually see them on the screen. It's much easier. But I don't know if you can do that. That's fine. If you can't, don't worry, because it's all a bit short notice. Oh, brilliant! Thank you. Can people see that? So the minutes of last meeting we'll scan through. We had apologies, and then the minutes of the previous meeting. We spoke about the design quality framework. Laura Alvarez came to speak to us. Any comments on that? We then had the subgroup updates, and we'll get new updates from the subgroups. So anything to comment on that? I know people have probably seen these before the meeting. We had the update on the foot cycle bridge. Keep whizzing through. Actually, I'm struggling to read this in any. I can. Oh, that's better. Oh, that's better. Yes.
If I may, Chair, could I just update on the e-scooter, mainly for Chris Thompson's benefit? Yeah. Chris, you still haven't replied about your availability for the 27th of July for the e-scooter trial for the subgroup.
Was that on the Wednesday evening?
I'm not sure, Chris. It's the 27th of July.
The thing is, I think it was an evening. I did actually send an email saying I couldn't do another evening on a Wednesday.
If you could just reply to my email and say yay or nay, then I can go back to those who are organising it to let them know your availability.
Well, I did send an email, John, but I said I couldn't do another Wednesday evening.
Okay, if you could just resend it because I haven't seen it.
Okay, I'll do that for you, John.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah. We then had the update on the foot cycle bridge proposals. And on walking and cycling schemes. We then talked about reviewing subgroup members, and that's an agenda item tonight, I think, and the local access forum recruitment, which is linked. So any comments or corrections on those minutes?
All correct.
From anybody?
No.
Okay. Perhaps stop sharing the screen now. Thank you. Thanks, Kath. That's helpful. I think the next item. So again, I've scribbled my headings of the agenda down. I think we've got discussion.
Yeah, sorry, just add one comment to minutes. There was reference to walking and cycling routes and the island site. And as I mentioned at the recent planning subgroup meeting we had, I was supposed about a month ago to have a meeting with Adam from the Canal Turn to discuss that and the various issues around extending the canal towpath north of the Great Northern Close and the rebuilding of the steps and so on. Unfortunately, he failed to show up, but I have now managed to rearrange that meeting for next week, which in fact I'm doing on behalf both of the local access forum and on behalf of pedals, so I'll keep people informed. But after thinking I was getting nowhere with that, and of course that development is soon nearing completion, but at least I was, you seem quite keen to renew the meeting, having failed to show up before.
Yeah, oh, that's really good to hear. That's good news. Yeah, good opportunities there. Anything else from the minutes? I think we may find things get picked up in the agenda items. Can we move on then to the next item, which I think is the Queen's Road cycle crossing facility? I'm not sure who wants to lead on that one. Did you raise it, Dave, at planning? Or do you want to pick it up?
I did raise it again, yeah. Some people like Margaret know, and of course John and others who've been around with this group a long time. This is something that first cropped up about, I think, 8 or 9 years ago, and it was the time when the plans were about to go ahead for redeveloping Nottingham Station. And one of the issues that came up then, which has come up before, was about the wish of what was then East Midlands Trains to close the public footpath on the overbridge through the station, which of course we were very much opposed to. I might also add at this time that Tom Huggin, of course, was a very active member of the group. And he was, I think, pointing out the need to fight that closure. And also he pointed out that the need to, that actually formed part of a historic walking route, linking the city centre right through to the Meadows and Trent Bridge. And we also were aware at that time that within a few years, the City Council planned to divert traffic south to Broadmarsh, south of the station. And so that road is going to get much busier. And then it would be all the more important to have a safe crossing connecting to the public footpath and the overbridge. So it wasn't just a matter of keeping the right of way through the station for pedestrians, but also providing a safer crossing for pedestrians and cyclists across Queen's Road, linking to the cycle hub that Network Rail and East Midlands Railways has now have run for some years in the the basement of the Montessori car park. And for various reasons, although it was raised then, I think the engineer concerned was going to follow it up, left the employment of the City Council, so nothing came of it. And I was recently reminded, happened to be visiting there and found that road indeed very dangerous to cross. And I thought, whatever happened to this? So having been digging around, and John, I know, remembers the efforts we did make then to follow it up. And Margaret's also done some useful work digging up the original planning application, which showed that actually there was an obligation on the developer to provide a safer crossing at the time of the planning application for the station redevelopment. So assuming everybody is still very keen to make sure there is a safer crossing now, it seems long overdue that we should be reviving pressure for that, especially as that is now an extremely busy road carrying most of the through traffic on the south side of the city centre.
So do
anything you want to add, Margaret, from what you recall of when we discussed it originally, or indeed John?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I don't think I've forwarded this afternoon to you, Hugh, but John has kindly followed up that section 106 point, and with a positive outcome. I wonder if you want to say something, John. John contacted the person dealing with the application.
Yes, fine, Margaret. Yes, I'm happy to pick that up. They've dispensed with the need for the technical analysis because the council's road safety colleagues have identified there is a need for a crossing there. So sooner than do a technical assessment to see if there is a need, they've told the developer that there is a need and to crack on with it. That's it. The end.
Good. Very good.
So we're expecting progress on that then?
Yes.
Good.
Great.
And it'd be nice
Thanks,
to know
John.
when it's in place. Great, thank you. Guess there's no more on that.
Maybe we need to keep a watching brief on it, just to, revisit it in 6 months if there doesn't seem to be any progress on it, or we hear nothing.
That's a good idea. Does anybody want to remind us to do that?
I'll do that if you like.
I'll put a note in my diary now, Margaret, to remind you to remind me.
Yeah, okay.
Brilliant.
Okay, thanks,
you. John. So we go to the subgroup updates now. And I think, is that right, Jess? Thank you. Brilliant. So I think I do the first one, which is the walking one. And apologies again, I've not sent a written update round, but there's not a huge amount to say. We have made progress. So I think since the last meeting, we've published the St Anne's and Mapley one, which came out very soon after the last meeting. A few of us have been walking. The Baseford route is now 2 routes, and we've got a Baseford and a Cinder Hill route, and that content is being reviewed. So that's sort of fully written up and being going through, hopefully nearer the final stages now. So
can I just say something about that? You've not seen it, Liz, but I've sent all the 8 documents for that out earlier on today. So they have been done, released in draft form. In that, it'd be great to see any of you in the subgroup walking it or passing comments.
Thank you. That would be good. We did attempt to have a meeting as a subgroup last week or the week before. Last week, I think. But various things like COVID and the tennis prevented us so doing. So and various injuries. So we had hoped to explore a route in the Berridge area, but so we're still slowly making progress on these walks. So. Anybody got any comments or they want to make on the walking subgroup? Yeah, go on, Chris.
I don't know if this is appropriate. Since the last meeting, I held a meeting with myself and Mike News with the Mike and Tom regarding the River Lee.
Yeah.
And we've now got costings, and we're actually putting it together everything, and we will be producing a report very soon for this committee.
That's meetings with Mike, Muse and Tom.
We met Mike Muse and myself met Tom and also Martin from the Green Strategy Group. They're going to help us provide the advice on how we should go forward, and also help us with the costings of it, and give us some idea of the costings. So
that from the people from the Open Spaces Forum?
They're giving us some advice on how we should move forward.
Okay.
And so I've now got that information, and we're now putting a report together of the complete route, how it will actually operate, and that will be given in the next 2 weeks. That's
really good to hear. Thank you. Be lovely to see that route finalised. I'd certainly be interested in doing it. Be lovely to see it published. Yeah. Potentially a good opportunity, tourism-wise as well. Perhaps, I don't know. Anybody else wants to add on walking? Rob Kirkwood has now joined our subgroup as well. He's not here unable to be here tonight. But, okay, so I think we go to planning next. Margaret, are you able to do that?
Yes.
Thank you.
The big news is we actually had a face-to-face meeting of the subgroup, which, for the first time in forever. Amongst the matters we discussed were cycle parking standards, the carbon neutral review panel stopping up orders, and the capacity of the group to deal with the amount of work or potential work there is. With regard to cycle parking standards, we will continue to use those in the local plan, but also refer to the more recent advice in Department for Transport, Local Transport Note 120. And various members of the team have been collecting examples of good practice from elsewhere, which I think could prove useful for us as we move on. With regard to the carbon neutral review panel, the forum has a place or places on that. How the panel will operate is still being worked out. So, you know, notionally we've got a place or places, but as yet, I don't think the panel is actually working. They're looking at processes, but, you know, that's positive. Stopping up orders. There are 2 current draft stopping up orders on sites which received planning permission earlier this year, conditional permission. We've not objected to the one on the Ridgeway site and are looking in more detail at the one on the Padstow School Plainfield site. Dave's done some work recently on that, so we can get a better idea of how the proposals relate to the stopping up, rather than the 8 different maps that, or whatever there were to scroll through to try and understand the situation. I mean, we did have a bit of a debate within the group as to whether, given we are pretty overstretched, we're the right place to be actually dealing with stopping up orders. And given John's recent email about groups and subgroups and functions, etc. I mean, I think it's valid to make a suggestion of where that role should be placed in the future. So I don't know whether Chris has any thoughts about that with regard to the definitive map group being a better home for it once it's got through the planning process. I mean, I don't think this is a huge thing. I don't know, you know, about the number of stopping up orders there are, but that was just something that came out of the group. As I said, we do feel we're a bit stretched, and fingers crossed we'll get some new recruits out of the process or some more volunteers from the rest of the group. I'm looking at Ian, who's a qualified planner and did work in the group at some time. Maybe he'll decide it's time he just, you know, helped a bit.
I see.
Even if it's only now and again.
I'll try and help.
Oh, well, I'll put you in the rota then.
Well, we'll see about that. But yeah, I'll gladly say something on these matters. I think some people are more sort of technical in terms of and design orientated than I am. But yeah, I'll gladly try and help.
That's good, Ian. Thank you. On the planning applications that we have commented on since the last meeting, I mean, we've screened almost 500 applications, commented on about 15. The vast majority of those are about the inadequacy of cycle parking provision. One notable one that has a wider application is the one on land between Clifton Wood and Clifton Phase 4 of Yew Tree Lane. The main focus of our objection was the lack of attention given by the application to the adjacent and nearby rights of way and the connectivity to them. And also we viewed the master plan as being outdated in following a design approach that puts motor vehicle traffic ahead of active modes of travel and is unlikely to encourage sustainable travel. There's also a lack of attention to detail. including on cycle parking. But they were concerns that we expressed. I mean, this has been in the system for some time. I think that was in May. Dave dealt with this one. So if anybody has any queries, I'm sure he will be able to help. I've got nothing else to say. I'm not going to run through all the other applications, but if anybody wants to see a copy of my notes, I'll gladly forward them to you.
Chris and Hugh got their hands up, I think.
Yeah, I just wanted Dave just give a bit more an update regarding that application that goes over the site at
Chris, sorry.
You can't hear you.
Can't hear you very well. Can you speak?
Well, I had it sorted out only today and it's been repaired and it was in full working order. I don't know what's going on.
Chris, really sorry. It's really hard to hear you. If you just, I think it's if you just speak a bit more slowly, we might catch it. Sorry. Okay. Thank you.
I spent £100 today to have it all reported and put right. Because I went on to Windows 11 and this is where I met the problem. Anyway, I wanted whether Dave could give us an update on how we can get these rights away across that school site near the leisure centre. You know the one I mean, Dave? The one that you're talking about.
The Padstow?
Yeah. A bit more
Dave, are you able to comment?
Well, yeah. So there's a draft order which is being published now. So it's in its objection period. So that runs until the 28th of July from memory.
Yeah.
So we're able to object to that should we wish. Obviously, we need to have reasonable grounds for objecting. What the applicant seems to have done in drafting the order or providing information to DFT for them to draft the order, the applicant basically prepares the plans, submits an application form. The draft order is then prepared by DFT and published in draft to allow objections. The drawings that go with the draft order show a variety of routes across the existing site as being stopped up. There's a question mark possibly as to whether they've captured all of the routes that exist across the site. I personally think that's a little bit academic. You could be picky if you wished and pick up on those things. For me, what's of more interest is the establishment of new rights of way across the site and whether those do the right thing, as it were, in replicating the existing ways across the site. Yeah. It's difficult without having a sensible conversation with the developer to be able to answer that question fully, because it's not entirely clear from the application which of the roads on the site are going to be put forward for adoption. So if those become adopted as highways, they will provide rights of way through the site of themselves without anybody effectively doing anything. So that would do a lot of the job of replacing the rights of way. But given they've applied for an order to replace the rights of way, I don't think we can assume that that's going to necessarily deal with everything that's required to restore the connectivity across the site. So you need to look at the order in some detail. My personal view is that the proposed diverted routes are perhaps deficient in a couple of places. So it's missing some outward connections from the site to existing paths on the kind of western boundary of the site. The application also shows some open spaces within the development, and the draft order kind of goes part way and puts right of way across one of those, but only across one of the paths that's shown on the planning layout. So it seems like a kind of a slightly half-hearted approach. in addition, I personally think that there ought to be a more direct link between the two bigger blocks of open space, and that's not shown as far as I can see from the draft order. So I'd be minded to lodge a fairly simple objection that just flags up the omission of those things.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Thank you very much. And can I just thank the planning people for the excellent work they're doing? And looking at all these applications. It's a marvellous work you're doing. Much appreciated.
Thank you for that, Chris. Yes, thank you. So, Dave, are you going to lodge that objection on behalf of the LAF?
Well, I've circulated my thoughts just this afternoon, so it's a bit kind of hot off the press.
Yeah.
And so I was waiting for, when I say circulated, to the planning subgroup. So just waiting for any feedback, and I'll give that, I don't know, a couple of days, something like that. And then I'll probably draft some kind of objection, circulate that. You know, it's a relatively short time frame to 28th. So, yeah, but it should be fairly straightforward to draft a simple objection, I think. So yeah, I'm happy to do that. Yeah.
Thanks for work on that. Any other comments on that point? I think Hugh's got his hand up.
Yes, my point was going back to what Margaret was saying about the cycle parking standards and the discrepancy between what's in the city local plan now and the more ambitious standards in DFT local transport note 120. And that raises the broader question now of the role of active travel in England that's been set up by Department for Transport based in New York, which is gradually getting going over several months. I think should be fully established by the end of the year. And their role is to ensure that the higher standards provision in local transport note 120 are met by local authorities to work in partnership with them. So that does raise the question, you know, more generally in especially, well, active travel provision, especially cycling and including the cycle parking, as to what standards will now prevail, whether it's a discrepancy like this. And certainly in the case of bigger schemes, I know DFT has said that active travel England's support for the upgraded designs by local authorities is vital if they are to secure funding for future schemes. So it's going to be something of increasing importance in the next few months as active travel in England gets more fully into its stride. And
it will help us to have clarity on that when we're commenting on applications. Because
And I might also mention on that point that I did suggest to Helen Hemstock recently that we invite Chris Boardman, who's the Chief Active Travel Commissioner, to come along to one of our next meetings, perhaps the one in October, if he's available, for a dialogue about, you know, general promotion of active travel in Nottingham.
That would be good.
Helen seemed keen to follow that up.
I'll just comment too, is because which was good. I had a comment back from one of the planners on one of the applications I commented on, because I commented in relation to the standards in the LTM 120, and he pointed out that that's different to the local plan ones, which I was aware of, but we're sort of thinking, you know, what are we holding the council to account on? And that
is only guidance, but its guidance will be of increasing importance, especially where there's funding attached to it.
And I think we want to be supportive of where the council, so we want to be commenting responsibly on planning applications and in a way that's supportive of, for example, our carbon neutral ambitions and our active travel ambitions. So, we want to look responsible and professional when we do it, don't we? So that's helpful. And then Councillor Pavlos, I think you had a comment.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, obviously, as a council, we support cycling places. And I know when I was in planning committee, one of the things that I always used to raise is about cycling provision. So it's really important to us. And obviously, it's part of our ambition for carbon neutrality 2028. So that's a very fair point. And I think I had an email from Hugh about this as well with more details on it. But yeah, please keep me appraised on it, and I'll keep talking to the planning department about it to make sure that we stick by those standards. In terms of planning in general, Margaret, if you have notes on specific planning applications that I can use for further promotion within the department, please send me emails about those, because if you want to stress specific applications you have points to raise, I might be able to get back to you with more detailed comments and advice. Yeah,
that's very helpful.
That's fine. What I wanted to say as well is that there's this. So obviously the future housing standards, which is going to come up in 2025. That's the full kind of version of the future housing standards. So there have been the first kind of parts of the measures, which is a reduced version of the future housing standards, which is it came in on the 15th of June. There is a grace period which comes until next year. So I'm just looking at my notes here. So the transition is 12 months. So this is building regulations, but there are some provisions in there about electric vehicle charging points and firming this up. So that's obviously good news. I might be able to feed back in more detail later in future meetings. But yeah, I mean, future housing standards is one of those legislations that builds towards the 2050 kind of net zero. That's the ambition of the government, very much the ambition of the city as well. So there will be provisions in there that link with what we do here as a group as well. So I'll try to feed back to you if I have any more information on that. Cheers.
Yeah,
thank you. That'd be very helpful. Anybody else got any comments for Margaret? If not, I've just got one, which I think was we hadn't quite decided. We mentioned about the LAF having a place on the carbon neutral design quality forum, but I think we weren't clear how we would resource that. Is that something we said we would review once we'd had the LAF recruitment? I can't remember now.
No, what we said on that was that we'd look at what was offered. It's likely to be on a site-by-site basis, so that we'd actually look to see who was the most appropriate to be involved once we've got a better idea of both the process and the sites under consideration, because it's more like pre-application discussions.
Yeah.
With regard to the capacity of the group, we said that we'd review that again once we knew the outcome of the recruitment process.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you. Dave?
Yeah, just going back to the subjects of cycle parking and LTN 120 versus planning policy. I mean, I read, Liz, the response that you got from the case officer on the application you commented on, and it kind of reading between the lines, I felt it was kind of saying, yeah, very interesting about LTN 120, but the application meets policy, so job done kind of thing. And I think, the difficulty that the officers have is that if they try and look to impose something that goes beyond policy, they'll find themselves at an inquiry with nowhere to go, and an inspector just will just rule in favour of the developer. So you've got planning officers without any backing from policy. So what's needed? LTN 120 is fantastic, but unless it's enshrined in city council policy or in a supplementary planning document, it'll never carry weight in applications to the city council. You just won't get buy-in from the officers because they know they'll come crashing down in flames if they're challenged at inquiry. Yeah. So it's a change in policy that's needed, either via a change in policy or a supplementary planning document that enshrines that change. That's what's needed.
Yeah. The interesting thing was that I think there's that particular one, and that was around student accommodation.
Yeah,
that was very near the city centre, and so actually I had some sympathy that actually LTN 120 might be more than is needed, because I think they anticipated a lot of, I don't know, and I wouldn't be qualified to judge on that. So yeah. Having clarity about what is appropriate standards is. But I take the point. If it's not policy, it's hard to stand by.
Yeah.
Anything else on planning? Oh, Chris has got his hand up.
Can I just ask you if you could just comment on what Dave, what's your view on it, Hugh? What Dave just said when you're involved with cycling?
Are you asking Hugh his view?
Sorry,
Yeah.
what was that? I didn't hear.
Well, you
I
just
think-
heard what Dave said, which is quite important. And we are actively involved in cycling. What's your view on Dave's view?
Sorry, Fred, I still didn't hear the question.
Chris, Hugh, I think Chris said, what is your view on what Dave has just said about policy versus guidance?
Yes, I certainly take Dave's point. Yes, as long as it's policy, you know, the officers concerned are going to be very cautious. But I mean, it's a broader question that needs raising. And perhaps if we are going to have a discussion with Chris Bolton or somebody else at our next meeting or one of our next meetings, that would be very useful to raise that directly. You know, because the general remit is to uphold these high standards and see that they're followed through. And that means not just in particular schemes, new cycle routes and so on, but also other aspects of the guidance, which includes cycle parking. So yes, I know it is guidance and I know it's not established policy, but this is still very important to raise. And it's the up-to-date thing that active DFT and Active Travel England are keen to see followed consistently by local authorities and indeed by developers, while allowing obviously for discretion in the case of particular sites. I mean, like, you know, sites closer to the city centre where pedestrian and bus access is going to be much more important and cycling perhaps relatively less. You can always argue a case like that, there's some flexibility, but it is, I quite understand Dave's points about how most case officers are, you know, worried about, not doing anything that is more ambitious than established policies in the local plans.
Mm. I agree.
Yeah. Councillor Pavlos, got your hand up?
Yeah, just to say, you know, you might be aware that we recently approved an IPPG checklist for developers in terms of new developments and the sustainability of new development. That's a guidance, obviously, is to ask for more sustainability measures, but it cannot really require the developers to do such. But it is obviously a good first step because it makes people reflect and hopefully it produces a positive result. But I think what has to happen, obviously, in terms of targets and so on, it's going to be the carbon neutral SPD, which is the next step. So we're already, you know, on the process of trying to start this now. So one of the things that I will try to make the case of with the officers when it comes to it is looking at the possibility of including something about cycling provision in that document, so that perhaps we can have some sort of policy basis to argue for more cycling place provision in new development as part of the carbon neutral SPD. Obviously, I cannot commit that it's going to be part of it because it has to go through a process and we have to look at all the different aspects of policy. But as you say, yeah, when it's in policy, it's easier to use in terms of material consideration and you know, on planning applications, isn't it? So I'm going to raise this and have a discussion with officers.
I think that wider context of carbon reduction is very important, especially since the publication of the government's transport decarbonisation strategy earlier in the year, which of course has a lot to say about promoting cycling and walking for short trips in urban areas. So you know, that makes the links, and again, the government expects those sort of new national policy guidance on transport decarbonisation in general will be reflected in particular decisions by local authorities, including planning applications.
So yeah, I mean, the carbon neutral SPD is not a transport document, obviously, but it might have, it can have certain things in there to ask for more cycling provision potentially. So I'll make that case.
I agree.
Anyway, so that's fine.
Good.
Cheers. Thanks.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Yeah.
No, that's fine.
You. Anything else on planning?
No, that's great.
Can we do the definitive map subgroup then? Is that Chris?
Yes, I'm representing the group tonight. Can you hear me? I just want to explain to John. We're in a situation that other people on the group don't have this sort of technology. Is there any way that we can get around this problem where we can have a meeting outside or something like that, and we can actually meet so we can all get involved? At the moment, we can't do that. Is there any way we could do that, John? Not answer. I'm asking John if we could have a meeting outside.
If I may, Chair, I think it's really difficult to hear you, Chris. And I think it's very important. It's very important what you're saying about being able to meet face to face again to move some of these things on.
That's right.
Can we deal with this outside the meeting? Because I'm struggling to hear you, and I'm sure
Can I just say something? Could I? It's perhaps an idea to try to do something now, actually, Chris. It may be a simple thing with your audio or something, because everybody is finding it hard to hear. It would be great if there was something there you could switch on or something so we could hear you.
I'll switch everything on. I was told to switch on. It's all.
What about moving closer to the microphone?
To the screen.
Right, okay.
You could try turning your camera off and then try talking closer to the microphone, because it could be the signal in your property.
Well, I was told to put the microphones above me.
Can I just check, sorry, Chair, can I just check, Chris, that you haven't got any papers or books around your laptop or PC?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll put the speakers closer now. Is that better?
It's a bit better.
Tiny bit, yes.
Do you want to try turning your screen off? It'll only take a moment. Your audio screen. Sorry, your video screen.
What do you have to do then? Just what will you need to do there?
Let's not take any more time up, Chris. The best thing is if you can email me with your query about meeting face to face, then we can deal with it like that sooner than take up more time, because I can't hear you very well and I don't want to miss your points.
No, okay, thank you very much.
So nothing else to update on the subgroup, just waiting to meet face to face.
That will be the way forward.
Okay, thanks for that. And the last one is the e-scooter group, which I'm not sure that's fully got going yet, John, but there's some, perhaps you can update on who the members are, and I think there's some planning for training, etc.
We've now got Nigel Sarsfield, Giselle and Paul Abel, and potentially myself, depending on when it is.
Yeah.
We've got a potential date of the 27th of July at 6 p.m. To have a trial on Victoria Embankment, which I thought was quite handy for everybody. Again, I'm just waiting for Chris to confirm availability, and then I can go back to those who are organised it to confirm 27th is a goer. If not, we'll just have to rearrange it. Simple as that. I mean, these things do take time to get up and running. Part of the recruitment, which is coming up under item 7, that's included now within the recruitment poster and on the application form about e-scooters. So we're hoping to sort of generate a bit of interest through the new recruits over summer.
Great. So I think we wanted representatives from e-scooter users as well as those who might be represented.
That's right. Yes, I've also, as part. I don't want to cut into the recruitment item, but I've also emailed the university to see if they've got any students who are interested, because I know a lot of students use e-scooters, and we can get those involved as well. So just to give a bit of a rounded view on it.
And a younger perspective as well, perhaps.
Yes, good idea.
Good. So nothing more to say on that, I guess. And so nothing else on subgroups covered. That's good. So I think we now.
Hello.
Sorry, Pavlos. Sorry.
Yes, I was looking through my documents because I couldn't find it a moment ago. So would you mind if I just kick back to the planning to just talk to you about the IPPG for a moment, because we just approved it and I found something that's really interested the group, and I'm sure you'll all be very happy to hear that. So do you mind if I do that?
No, that'd be lovely. Thank you. Thanks for doing that.
That's fine. So just to let you know that during the process of the formation of the IPPG, I did raise a lot of points about transport.
The
IPPG, it's a document that's advisory for developers to provide a checklist for sustainability measures they take for new developments. Apologies for the technicality. So there are certain questions that are being asked. And obviously, we worked with offices. I worked with offices to finalize the final questions on what they're going to ask. So I just wanted to read to you for your benefit, because I did raise the active travel thing. So sustainable transport, does the proposal promote opportunities for active travel? And what other sustainable proposals are aimed at actively encouraging walking, cycling, or public transport as the first choice for daily activities? Does that support the concept of 15-minute neighborhood? Those are all questions in that. Just further on. Cycle parking, how many spaces are to be provided? How many electric cycle charging points are provided? How many cycle parking is secured/covered? So just to make reference to the fact that those questions have been integrated into that. So the developers will have to answer those questions. So this is an advisory document, so it can't really ask people to do such things, but it can make them reflect on them. And obviously planning committee afterwards can pick those points up and ask questions. And I think that's crucial, because sometimes you end up being in planning committee talking about a specific development, and you ask questions about sustainability, you ask questions about cycle provision, and you know, the officers don't always have this data, because if there is no report from the developer on what is going to be provided, those questions are not always forthcoming. So that's why this document is actually quite significant in terms of upping the standard a little bit, building up towards the carbon neutral SPD. And apologies for the kickback, but I just wanted to make you aware of this, because it just approved policy.
That's helpful.
Cheers, thank you.
Margaret, would it be helpful if the planning group could see those questions, do you think? Or you're on mute, Margaret.
She's on mute.
She's sorting it.
It would be very helpful. I've seen some drafts, but quite some time ago. So to see the sort of definitive ones would be really useful.
Could you
let me go back to the offices and you know, try to get something out. I don't know exactly when it's supposed to be said or how this works, but I did approve it, so I think it should be allowed. So I'll go back to them and I'll ask for it. Margaret, can you send me an email so I can have your email, perhaps I can pass it on to you?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you.
Thanks, thank you for that. That's really helpful. So shall we move on to, oh yes, I'm going back. Future meetings at Loxley was the next item, I think. Kath will tell me if I've got that wrong. Is that right? Future meetings at Loxley, you're on mute as well, Kath. Is that right?
Hi. Yes. I don't know if John wants to speak to this. We're just having. Yeah, we have looked into
bit of
it.
both.
Do you want to take
Bit of
lead,
both,
John?
Kath. Yes. We're hoping that the next meeting, the October meeting, can be held in Loxley House. We've got a few issues to deal with regarding security out of hours, because as you know, local access forums kick off at 6:30, and I believe Loxley House closes to the public at 5 p.m. So there's a bit of shifting about we've got to do in terms of security. But the item is really just to gauge your feedback on whether or not you would like to try to have the next meeting, October meeting at Loxley House face to face. I fully appreciate that there are problems potentially on the horizon with COVID numbers increasing again, but based on today, would you all be happy to have the next October meeting at Loxley House face to face?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
I can't see any negatives there, so we'll run with that then. Obviously, we'll keep you informed. We'll make sure that by sort of, you know, coming towards the end of October, we'll be up to speed with what's happening in terms of COVID numbers again and the increase, and we'll let you know in plenty of time that the meeting is going to take place at Loxley House in October. I know one or two other members will be really pleased about that news, so thank you for your feedback, and we'll work on that basis. Do you want to add anything, Kath?
Thank you. Yeah,
No,
thanks very much.
I think that's partly too about making it accessible to people for whom the online is not accessible.
Yeah.
And I guess we review whether we want to do that all the time or a mix. Sometimes for some the online might be more accessible. So
and some of the issues we've had tonight with logging on, can't hear Chris very well, and all that sort of stuff. So
and stuff about functioning of the group, you know, the building of relationships when in a face-to-face environment. But anyway, so that's good. Thank you. I think the next item then is the LAF recruitment update, which again I think is you, John. Thank you.
Okay, so far it started, let me get my dates right, I think the 26th of June. We've had 4 interests so far. I've sent out 4 application packs. I've just revisited all the colleagues that I sent the consultation pack to back in June. They're refreshing their contacts and networks. I've now emailed Nottinghamshire Disability Group as well, and also another colleague I know a little bit closer to home in Nottingham who was also connected to a disability group. The university, as I said earlier, to try and capture some of those students who are coming back or potentially who are, you know, in contact with the university, PhD students, etc. And we'll see how it's going. The recruitment posters, you may have seen them while you've been out and about on some of the parks and open spaces. We've still got some more to put up. Obviously, some get ripped down, so we'll be refreshing those in places like Colic Park, Colic Wood, stuff like that, which are really popular this time of the year. And we do now have around about 30 or 40 posters ready to be picked up from Loxley House. If any of you guys want to pick up 4 or 5 and put them in your local area, just send us an email. I'll arrange to have them put at the reception at Loxley House so you can pick them up during the day.
Thank you.
That struck me too, John, that I wondered whether an interesting analysis of members might be the geographical representation across the city. Well, knowing where people live or the areas that they're familiar with. I don't know if that's a.
What are you asking? Sorry, I missed what you're actually asking me to do there.
No, it's just a question that I wondered whether, and I'm not sure, given we represent access across the city, to what extent we as a group are well represented? Do we represent the geographical area?
I see. I did do this.
Quite a few of us, for example.
Some of you may remember a conversation we had at a local access forum meeting when I believe it was the portfolio holder for transport at the time asked about the geographical spread of local access forum members. And I went through an exercise, got everybody's address and plotted everybody on a map. I haven't done that for about 4 or 5 years. So I couldn't really tell you off the top of my head whether or not you are spread evenly or where you are in the city off the top of my head.
Would it be something you'd be happy to have a look at? Is that?
Yeah, I'd love to do stuff like that, but then I'd have to drop something else like Ian's walk and stuff like that. So, I mean, does it matter if it's slightly duplicated because posters do get pulled down or ripped down and stuff like that? So, if it'd be easier if he just says, yeah, can you organise for me to pick 4 or 5 up from Loxley House?
Yeah, I didn't so much mean in terms of distribution of posters. I meant in terms of our work. Are we adequately representing, with our knowledge across the city? It was just a question.
I would say yes, definitely, because you all know a hell of a lot about Nottingham City and its connections to Nottinghamshire. So yeah, I mean, you've got people like Hugh McClintock who cycles everywhere, Ian Bussey who cycles everywhere. So they don't just stick in Nottingham; they cut across the public. I've said this a million times: public rights of way don't follow political boundaries. So go where you have to go and do what you have to do. But as far as I can see, you represent Nottingham brilliantly.
Well, that's good to know. So good, thank you.
Just one other quick question about recruitment, if I could, please. What's the deadline? It's good to get all these posters out now, John. How much time are people
hang on,
given to respond?
I think it's the 27th of August.
Right.
Which is more or less the same as the last recruitment we did in 2018. We ran it for approximately 2 months, 2 and a bit months, something like that.
So there could be a chance of having some of the people recruited in place for our next meeting in October, or is that a bit ambitious?
That's what the plan is. Yeah, that's
Good.
why we did it like we've done it, because last time, if you remember, we did some informal sort of interviews at Loxley House.
Yeah.
And we could do that again, or we could do it on Zoom or Microsoft Teams or something like that. But we'll agree that once we've got a few applications come back.
Yeah, good.
Sounds good. And we have got a couple of new members, actually, relatively new members, haven't we? In Paul and
we have
Rob.
Paul Abel and Rob Kirkwood. Yeah.
Good. Any other comments on the recruitment?
It's not particularly recruitment, I suppose, but I was, if we try to recruit people, I think it's good to show where there's a demand for cycling and walking. And I'm just asking, does anybody know whether or not there's a big increase in the number of people cycling since COVID started? I'm not aware of it particularly as I cycle around, but I'm just a bit curious, because if there is a big increase, then it might help to attract people into the group. There's a demand.
Does anyone have a... John,
I've definitely noticed an increase in walking, Ian, since COVID. It was one of the, if you like, key things that we wanted to do at the City Council to keep public rights of way open, even when there was the lockdown and it was very difficult to get contractors out and stuff like that. We were very keen on doing the vegetation cutting over the summer in order for people to exercise locally, and to give them that extra bit of width when they were walking for the 2 meter distance and stuff like that. But yeah, I've definitely noticed a difference in the use of public rights of way since, say, March 2020.
And that's continued. Has continued.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Any other responses to Ian's question? If not, I'll go to Chris, who's got his hand up.
I did mention at a previous last meeting if we could look at less abled walkers. Is that something that's been looked into? Less abled walkers.
Less abled walkers being represented on the forum, do you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think John's mentioned about the disability groups, didn't you?
Yes, I've just emailed a colleague who I know from previous work when she used to sit on the Nottingham City Disability Advisory Group, which unfortunately had to fold because we didn't have an officer to facilitate that anymore. And I've also emailed the Nottinghamshire Disability Advisory Group. And if you go on their website, it does say that we're happy to help where we can in terms of providing advice on access and disability issues, looking at planning and building regulations and stuff like that. So that fits in quite nicely. I haven't had a response yet, but I will chase it up, Chris, within a week or two.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions on recruitment? Then I think we move to future agendas as the next agenda item. I had a quick look at the things we've already got. We had a number of things listed. We've talked about active travel and Chris Boardman earlier in the meeting. And you were contacting them, weren't you, Hugh, I think? Chris? You're on mute, Chris.
Mute.
Chris, you're on mute.
Hugh.
Hugh, sorry, Hugh, I mean.
Yes.
Sorry.
I hadn't got well, the only email address I had an email address for Brian Deacon, who's now head of inspections at Active Travel England, but that's when he was at Transport for London some years ago, and obviously he's moved on. I hadn't got one for Chris Boardman, but Helen managed to track down his personal website, which included a link to his Active Travel role. So she's registered an interest. There was a facility there for registering interest and people coming to speak at meetings, him to come and speak at meetings and so on. So she's made him aware of it, but no doubt he's got a great many other engagements. But she was going to suggest, I know, that he come make a contribution to our next meeting in October.
Yeah. So we'll try for him.
It might not be until sometime after that, because I'm sure he's got great deal of limitations.
Yeah. There's a number of things that are carried over from last minutes on future agenda items. Is it helpful to run through those?
I've got a bit of if I may, Chair, the new footbridge on the minutes of the last meeting. One of the suggested items was a joint meeting with the county council, Nottinghamshire County Council Local Access Forum, to discuss the new footbridge planning application and the progress of that. I have emailed Neil Lewis at the county. He said he would pass that on to the chair of the county local access forum, but to date I haven't had a response.
So we're waiting response on that then.
I'll take an action away to chase that up again.
If it would help, I could also, I mean, that's Penny Lynn Rose is now chair of the County Local Access Forum, and I've been dealing with other things recently, so I could also put that to her directly, unless you just prefer to go through Neil Lewis as you started.
No, not at all. Okay. Anything you can do to, yeah.
Will do.
Okay. Other suggestions we've had for future agenda items, and conscious we won't want too many, but there's planning white paper, living streets, Broadmarsh, and the highway code changes. I don't know whether we want to follow any of those up for next meeting.
Well, if I can just say on the planning white paper, given the political uncertainties at the moment and the changes in responsibilities, and further changes likely, it's probably not the time to be looking at the planning white paper.
So defer that for not just keep that under review for next year, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe.
Councillor Pavlos?
Yeah, on the planning white paper. So many of those provisions that were part of the planning white paper have been adopted into the levelling up bill. So the situation has moved on now. And we have had a couple of presentations in the forums that link the county and the city, basically talking about planning issues, the strategic bodies up there. So I could give a brief to the group about, what's basically happening on this. But if you think that it's too early for it, we could delay it until further later. I mean, I wouldn't be able to be very specific because, as you say, it's very early stages at the moment, so we don't really know exactly what's going to happen.
I mean, I don't know how much of that was attached to Michael Gove's involvement and how much will be taken on in future.
So some of the things that were on the initial presentation in August 2020, when the white paper came in, were taken back, like things like growth zones, for example, automatic approvals and things like that. That was taken all away. And the Queen's speech made it quite clear that there's going to be strict votes for extensions of things like that. So they did come back from a lot of the controversial kind of aspects of the first kind of proposals they brought in. Back then, I was campaigning through the RIBA and other groups to make sure that there is planning democracy, because this is absolutely crucial. One of the things that I'm very sorry that's happening is that whilst they took back some of the things that were a bit controversial, the aspect of centralizing planning policy on the national level and taking away weight from local plans is still part of what's happening, I suspect. Now we'll still keep pushing and keep campaigning on this to make sure that local plans, because they're local documents, have gravity and have weight, and that the public is consulted not just on the policy level, but on the application level as well, on the specific application level. Because what's happening now is they're trying to take the contribution of the public away from the planning application level and move it on to the policy level, on the guidance level, or whenever these design guides are being presented, perhaps there's going to be more public involvement. This requires a lot of discussion, so I'm not going to cover the whole thing. But if you want to have some sort of mini presentation from me on that, on what's happening in broad terms, I'm happy to do that for the group.
That sounds like that might be useful. Do we think that would be useful next meeting?
I think it
Margaret?
would be. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Can we say yes, please, to that then? Thank you. That may be enough for another meeting.
I think just it would be useful sometime to have a contribution on the highway code, particularly in some months since new highway code provisions came in, which are obviously key now to promoting active travel. So depending what else we do end up with for October, whether it's active travel England or the kind offer that Pavlos just made, we could consider that for another meeting, perhaps the following one in January, sometime in October.
Could I just suggest that I forgot what I was going to go and say. Oh yeah, that we look at oh, sorry, I've completely forgotten what I was going to go and say. Councillor Pavlos, I'll give you go first, actually. I'll remind myself.
That's okay. Yeah. No, what I wanted to say is obviously, as you understand now, that the way that they did the portfolios, I have culture, leisure, and planning. So planning is something that I specialize, planning policy and planning strategy. But there are aspects of waste that are covered by waste, and transport is covered in the transport portfolio. So whilst you focus on active travel, there are some bits that I can pick up and help on the planning work that I do. But the portfolio holder for transport, you know, is one of those people who focuses on transport issues. So I don't know if they would have feedback for the group as well at some point. I don't know if they'll come regularly, but you could send an invitation. I think Audra Winter is the portfolio holder for transport. Yeah,
I've got a meeting with Councillor Winter on the 18th of this month to discuss the local access forum, following an invite onto the forum by the chair, Helen. So it's just, I think she just wants a bit of an update on who you are and what you do and all that sort of stuff. So that might be a good opportunity to flag that up as well, Councillor.
Sounds like a good idea, John. But it seems you're already doing it. I mean, I'm going to leave it to you then. That's fine. Cheers.
We could probably cut depending on the length of updates, we can probably accommodate 2 or 3 agenda items, can't we? We keep others, we can. So it sounds like we've got 3 or 4 potential things there.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
It was a follow-on from Hugh, actually, about the highway code. Perhaps say something about how the change in that has affected cycling, because cyclists are now supposed to have more preference. And I just wondered if Hugh or anybody else could say anything about that at the next meeting, about whether that's working or not.
And pedestrians, I think this, yes, be useful.
I could do, but I haven't got anything more than anecdotal evidence on that. But it would be useful to know, given that it's now 6 months since the changes came in, it would be useful to know of any evidence that is coming out about the impact so far. And also the general question of publicity, because I know there's been quite a lot of criticism that the government hasn't done very much to follow it through with adequate publicity. And still, a lot of road users, especially drivers, are not aware of these changes. And that's a criticism, you know, for some months now, and at least so far, that there don't appear to be any extra effort by government to make sure that there is wider awareness of these changes and their implications.
So John, could you request that when you have the meeting? When you meet with portfolio head and
regarding the high changes to the highway code?
Having that as somebody coming.
I'm not sure if you'd be better off talking to those who published the highway code and came up with the ideas or the new ideas. I mean, I was thinking whether or not it would be a DFT thing, and we could you know, from the local access forum, approach the Department for Transport and say, you know, have you any indication of whether or not your new ideas within the code are actually working? Personally, I have seen some comments about pedestrians thinking that drivers aren't aware that pedestrians now have priority over vehicles, and I'm guessing likewise for cyclists. Some cyclists are taking the highway code for the as it's stated within it and going across a junction thinking that drivers are also aware of the highway code. And that comes down to publicity. So it may be better coming from the local access forum if you approach the Department for Transport.
I mean, I think this is certainly crucially important how far people are generally aware, all road users, both in exercising their rights and the change of emphasis. I mean, no doubt our chair, Elaine Hemstock, in view of her work for Ridewise, will be particularly aware of these issues, and you know, because that impacts on behaviour changes and so on that they're promoting. She might well have views on whether to get somebody from DFT or not. I mean, if we could, DFT would be good, but I don't know how much work has been done. A, in response to the calls for greater publicity, and B, in evaluating the impact of the changes so far.
Would you like me to follow that up, Liz?
Yeah, that would be great if you could.
I'll take that action away and have a chat with Helen to see whether or not we can get. It may be a little bit early on in the in the implementation of the highway code, whether or not there is any information. But as you say, Hugh, Helen's probably really well placed for that sort of discussion.
I mean, the only other thing is to get contributions from other groups that were heavily involved in pressing for the changes, like Cycling UK and, for all I know, Ramblers as well at national level. What do they think of the impact so far? Because certainly they have been, I know, calling for DFT to give it more publicity.
There may also be data on casualties, whether there's been an increase in the number of people who are ending up in hospital or going to doctors because they've had accidents, because they think they have priority in certain things.
The chances are there is some work being done, you know, by academics or consultants or whatever, probably, as well as DFT. So it would be useful to put our fingers on that before we make it a definite topic for discussion at a future meeting.
It might also be
hard evidence to go on.
Might also be interesting to look at it in the local context, because when I think about some of the junctions I cross, and some of them, you know, some of the quiet streets is fairly straightforward and easy, but some of the junctions you've got turnings into on busy junctions, it almost feels like if you, they're particularly vulnerable and not easy on a practical point of view. You know, people turning right into junctions across busy traffic. You know, the last thing they're going to be looking at, they will be looking at, but you know, it's tricky. Yeah, be interested to see, does that need changes to, you know, if the priorities change, does it need signing? But anyway, that might be an interesting discussion point. Yeah, I know. So if you can have that, if you have that discussion with Helen, John, and then we can decide whether, how and when to take that forward, that'd be really helpful. I think that's probably enough. Perhaps we can keep the other things that we've got as potential future agenda items, Living Streets and Broadmarsh, listed on the future agenda items, Kath, perhaps, and then we've got them to review next time. Is that enough to be getting on with?
Yep.
Everybody happy? Anybody not?
Yes.
I think that therefore brings us to any other business. Have we had any items raised in any other business in advance? I'm assuming not. Is there anything anybody wants to raise now? Great. In which case, I think the next and final item is the date of the next meeting, which is Wednesday, the 12th of October. And as I say, we're hoping it will be in Loxley House in person, but we will confirm that and obviously keep it under review, linked to COVID and other things, and we'll see how that goes. So can I thank everybody who's come tonight, when I guess you'd much rather be sitting in the garden. So thank you all for your time and contributions. Really helpful. And
thanks for sharing it, Liz.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for sharing it, Liz.
You're very welcome. Okay, take care then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.